No, you're not imagining things. That antique bottle didn't just move for no reason. It's not empty, and neither are you. You see, chosen one, certain objects don't just hold dust, they hold memory. They hold resonance. They hold unfinished business, spiritual residue from everything you've endured, everything they did, and everything they thought they buried. That twitch was a signal, not from fear, but from truth. Something just woke up. Be mindful of how you treat others, they say. But here's the full truth. Some people aren't people at all. They're mirrors. They're portals. They're consequences. That's you. You are not here to blend in. You are not here to be liked. You are here to reveal. Let this sink in. The human brain processes emotional rejection the same way it processes physical injury. So when they disrespected you, doubted you, lied to you, they didn't just hurt your feelings. They tore their own spiritual ligaments. They ruptured their own connection to destiny. And karma? Oh, it's not some patient bird circling the sky, waiting 3 to 5 business years to land. No, karma sometimes puts on your face, walks into a room, and says, I'm your lesson. That's why you feel heavy when you're around certain people. That's why rooms shift when you enter. You are not just a person. You are a decision point, a divine mirror, the last checkpoint before collapse or rebirth. They wanted to play with you like you were average. But your silence? That was scripture. Your departure? That was divine closure. Your laughter? That was prophecy fulfilled. So when the bottle twitched, it wasn't just movement, it was memory activating. A spiritual nudge. A warning to your enemies. A confirmation to you. They thought they closed that chapter. But glass doesn't lie. And energy doesn't forget. Today, understand this. You're walking karma. Not to punish. Not to seek revenge. But to expose. To elevate. To finalize. So fasten your seatbelt, chosen one. First of all, you don't discipline them. The phrase they previously selected is mirrored by you. You don't curse them. You don't punish them. You don't do anything at all. However, the instant they cross you, their life begins to fall apart. Why? Since you are the physical manifestation of the energy they emit. You are the mirror that compels people to face the karma they have made for themselves, not their karma. In reality, they are making a spiritual pact when they deceive you, betray you, make fun of you, or take advantage of you. And the small print says, whatever you do to this soul, you'll face it in equal or greater measure soon. Most people think that you won't be any different since they are so used to getting away with harming other people. However, when they target a chosen one, they set off a law that reacts to vibration rather than drama. And because you are firmly rooted in truth, your vibration doesn't play around. A walking scale is what you are. The balance changes and things start to go wrong the instant someone betrays your integrity. They believe you're too calm, meek, and willing to overlook it. They fail to understand that your quiet is not a sign of weakness, but rather of global judgment rather than your own. Your job is to remain still and allow the truth to come to light, not to fight back. And it always does, I assure you. They begin losing things like peace, chances, favors, and connections as a result of the falsehoods, gaslighting, and treachery. Why? Because they disregarded heavenly protection when they mistreated you, and it is evident that they are no longer protected. They weren't destroyed by you. The instant they attempted to play God in your life, they made the decision to fail. They are now compelled to sit in the mess they made. You carried a kind of spiritual weight that people undervalued, not because you wanted to hurt them. That's what it means to be walking karma. The evidence rather than the penalty. You are proof that the cosmos was keeping an eye on you the whole time. Second, without uttering a word, your presence reveals their unhealed spirit. People feel vulnerable around you without you having to utter a word because your energy instantly removes the mask off their soul. Being selected has the advantage of bringing attention to things that others have worked hard to conceal. People get uncomfortable, judgmental, or even agitated when you enter a room, and you haven't even spoken yet. Your energy transmits truth, and truth inherently makes falsehoods unpleasant, Therefore, it's not because you're doing anything wrong. Performance has been the foundation of most people's life. They use diversions and filters to adorn their wounds, recite prepared words, and wear artificial grins. But everything begins to go apart when you arrive. You don't know how to cooperate just to maintain harmony. And you don't put up with artificial enthusiasm. You make others doubt themselves without even trying. They begin to feel vulnerable, tiny, and as if their conscience, rather than you, is watching them. Although you don't pass judgment on others, you do mirror them. Being around you allows others to glimpse who they really are. You're like a spiritual glass. And it might be a scary experience for some people. They like circumstances that allow them to remain numb, relationships that accentuate their dysfunction, and people that deceive them. However, you interfere with it. They are reminded by your presence of the work they have avoided, the hurt they have not yet resolved, and the truth they have suppressed. Thus, rather of developing, they project, lash out, and talk. In their hearts, they know that your light annoys the darkness they have reconciled with, yet they label you too much or too deep. The issue is not with you. You serve as evidence that they have settled down and ceased to evolve. More than anything else, it terrifies people because they will have no justification for continuing to be false if you can be that genuine, that honest, and yet walk with grace. Your presence is bothersome because of this. You're waking their conscience, not disparaging their character. Third, you're the boss at the end of their spiritual exam that they can't avoid. Some individuals have avoided responsibility their whole lives. They used charm as a weapon, lied, manipulated, ghosted people, and left every difficult lesson before it caught up with them. But something changed when they met you. The typical escape routes closed, the manipulation failed, and the techniques ceased functioning. This is due to the fact that you are not just a person going through life. Rather, you are the ultimate test that others cannot pass. They already carried unlearned lessons with them when you entered their lives. However, they continued to take shortcuts, skip stages, and place the blame on others rather of confronting them directly. Then you arrived, bringing truth instead of condemnation. You weren't a gamer. Dysfunction was not something you entertained. You contributed spiritual maturity, emotional depth, honesty, and true love, the type that pushes you to change or go. And as a result, being in your presence made them face their true selves. This explains why so many individuals either spiral out of control or change entirely after meeting you. No intermediate ground exists. You provide a kind of energy that either reveals stagnation or drives development. They have the option to rise to the occasion or fail due to their own immaturity. Your energy is the last checkpoint before their karma catches up, which is why you are the last boss, not because you are superior to anybody. They were given a last chance to level up, treat someone with respect, react with love rather than dominance, and put development ahead of ego. And as the lesson grows harder after you, there was no second opportunity when they messed up that. The cosmos begins to convey consequences instead of grace. Their lives began to fall apart as a result. It was their unwillingness to change, not your fault. You had the chance to stop the cycle when the last exam appeared while wearing your face, but they were unsuccessful. It was their refusal to pass, not their inability to do so. Fourth, not only did they lose you, but they also lost the potential version of themselves. When they lost you, it was the collapse of a future they would never touch again, not simply the loss of a relationship. In their lives, you were more than just a friend, a lover, or a presence. By being around you, but also by being pushed, inspired, and stretched by your energy into a version of themselves they didn't even know was possible. You were a gateway, a rare alignment, and a holy moment in time when the universe gave them a chance to become someone bigger. You saw them, the unvarnished version, the one underneath the ego, the scars, the performances, and that frightened them. You didn't simply love them, because it's more difficult to maintain your pretense when someone sees you in real life. However, they failed to see that being seen by you is not an act of exposure, but rather an invitation to develop, heal, and become the version of themselves that could at last breathe without all the masks. However, they fled rather than risen to the occasion. They attempted to bring you down with them, or worse. They used language to mask the weight of what they lost, and when that failed, they attempted to persuade themselves that you were the issue, that you were too intense, too deep, or too much. However, the reality remained. It remained in the quiet, in the voids, in the fact that things no longer fit for them the way they did when you were there. They can feel it now. The void, the lost chance, the odd feeling that something once in a lifetime has slipped through their fingers. The knowledge that there is no turning back hurts more than anything else. Only in the presence of someone like you did that potential version of them exist. And that chronology has vanished along with you. You weren't just lost. They were deprived of a future they would never have again. Fifth, you are the result that appears in the garb of elegance. With an open heart, unambiguous intentions, and a love that didn't have complicated terms, you entered their lives softly. You gladly shared your knowledge. They didn't deserve the patience you gave them. You offered healing to those who only knew how to inflict pain, and you brought calm to spaces that were used to turmoil. You had a presence that most people don't notice until it's gone. You were genuine, composed, and present. And there was the issue. They believed you might be taken for granted because of your tenderness. They confused emotional weakness with spiritual grace. What their ego prevented them from seeing, however, was that your presence represented more than simply compassion. It was a celestial safety net designed to catch them before the fall, a final opportunity, a heavenly diversion. You were kindness in action, not just a person. You were the kind of love that appears just before a disastrous lesson. Additionally, they did more than simply damage your emotions when they rejected, deceived, or mistreated you. They closed the door on a gift from God. The energy shifts after you. The elegance disappears. Because of your presence, the protection that accompanied them vanishes. Nothing feels exactly the same in life. Their previous strategies have now backfired. Because they lose more than simply a connection, the support they had starts to wane. They became out of harmony. When someone spits on a heavenly gift, the cosmos takes it seriously. And whether they acknowledge it or not, you were that gift. It's not your job to punish. That's why you came. You came to provide a redemptive alternative. However, the offer ended when they made fun of it, not out of resentment, but rather because it was out of balance. What individuals misuse cannot continue to be given by the cosmos. In order to provide closure rather than retaliation, it withdraws the offer. The issue wasn't with you. You were the answer. But now that you're gone, the door that you once kept open is permanently closed. Sixth, they use your name to write their own demise rather than harm you. They believed they were only playing with another human being, another good-hearted person they could deceive, manipulate, belittle, ignore, and leave without repercussions. But you were the pivotal moment in their lives, not simply a chapter. I'm not ready for alignment. I'm not ready for truth. I'm not ready for what I asked for. They didn't really damage you, but what they did to you was more than simply poor conduct. It was a loud spiritual message to the cosmos. Even though you experienced discomfort, you recovered. You developed. You rose. Instead of hurting you, the energy they delivered made you more perceptive. However, they continue to live with the consequences of their own choices. The residue of what they did to you is what causes every lost chance, broken relationship, and locked door that refuses to move no matter how hard they try. Not because you harbor resentment, but because what they did was a spiritual act with repercussions. You became the line in their karma that they cannot remove. In their lives, you were a supernatural presence, mishandling that had consequences. Your name is now secretly etched in the footnotes of every defeat. Their deeds became the curse, not because you condemned them. Not you, the ghost. Indeed, they are. The instant people choose control above connection, falsehoods over love, or ego over elevation, they are tortured by it. Without understanding that they were laying a foundation for their own future, they attempted to disrespectfully bury you. In the spirit world, they are now unable to revise a previously published article. You advanced, luminous, safe, changing. However, they're still dealing with the fallout from their own choice. In addition to hurting you, they unintentionally made your name the mirror reflecting everything they still won't correct. They missed the train because you were the timeline shift, number 7. You were more than simply a person who entered their lives. You were the pattern's break, the matrix's shift, the point at which time divided into two potential futures, one in which they were elevated, and another in which they repeated everything they said they were sick of. You didn't arrive with fireworks or force. You arrived with presence, alignment, and a unique calm that unnerved them because they understood deep down that it was holy and not like the others. You weren't supposed to amuse people. You were not a phase, a filler, or a fling. They needed to go from survival mode to actual development, the type of change that only occurs once in a lifetime, and you were the reroute, a divine detour. However, they made fun of it rather than accepting it. They mocked the one thing that may have cured them, calling it too intense. Instead of just pushing you away, they unintentionally put themselves back in the loop they were hoping to break. They're trapped now because they refused to change course, not because they were disciplined. Wearing new faces, the same debates, the same emotional games, the same phony relationships, and the same loss. While their lives seem to be replaying itself in slow motion, they are on repeat, watching you ascend in real time. Not only do they feel the sorrow of losing you, but they also know that they were at a crossroads with their fate and choose comfort, ego, and the misery they vowed to detest. You were the one-time only train. They believed there would be another you, another time, another opportunity. But while they're still standing on the station, accusing everyone else of ignoring what they themselves missed, you're on that train, heading toward plenty, tranquility, and purpose. You didn't cause any trouble. They failed to see that you were the heavenly interruption. Eighthly, they are unable to apologize as doing so would entail acknowledging your blessed status. When a gift is staring them in the face and holding them responsible, most people aren't built to acknowledge it. Saying sorry to you would require them to take a step back, tear down the barriers they erected around their ego, and accept the difficult-to-accept reality that you were more than simply a person in their life. A rare alignment delivered from someplace higher than their obstinate pride. You were a gift. Their pride is like smoke and mirror armor. It protects them from acknowledging the extent of their mistakes. That armor would be torn down by an apology. It would compel them to acknowledge that they treated something holy, something heavenly, improperly. And for a lot of people, it hurts more than any suffering you gave them because it indicates that they turned down a gift directly from God. Such humility is uncommon, if not non-existent, among people who would rather place the blame, deny, or vanish. They so descend into self-destruction rather than taking responsibility for their role. They destroy their future, their relationships, and themselves. Because it is too painful to acknowledge the reality that you were the blessing they discarded. Instead of facing the embarrassment of having spat in the face of grace, they would rather to destroy relationships, cause mayhem, and live in denial. You won't get the appropriate apologies. You don't have to bear that load. Their pride and anxiety colliding with the indisputable reality is the source of their quiet, their detachment, and their resentment. They couldn't deal with the fact that you were sacrosanct. Real closure comes from understanding that their failure to apologize is a stark reflection of their own spiritual bankruptcy rather than your value. And you are set free by that fact. You're not the penalty, number 9. You are the living example of grace's limitations. No matter how many times someone abuses grace, people prefer to think of it as an unending river that flows without end. However, it is a fiction of comfort rather than fact. Grace has limits, boundaries, and a breaking point. It is not limitless. Grace becomes tangible and ceases to be abstract when you are around. How much kindness was shown before the last line was penned is reflected in you. They spent time with you. Your patience held the key to their prospects. All of their excuses, their apologies, and the time you allowed them to develop were acts of grace. Quiet yet forceful, you were the slow burn of kindness. They were unaware of it because grace whispers rather than shouts. It manifests as understanding, forgiving, and hope for improvement. But you left after a while. Grace became judgment at that point, not because you were mean or unkind, but rather because you refused to be a constant doormat for their errors. Your departure was the inevitable result of reaching your boundaries, not a kind of punishment. When grace stops, the world just becomes honest. It doesn't suddenly become cruel. You are a living example of the fact that grace has a cost. The book shuts after that tally, leaving just the unvarnished truth of deeds having repercussions. Their punishment wasn't you. You demonstrated that there is a limit to compassion. It was balance, not malice, that drove you away. Once leaning toward forgiveness, the balances are now balanced in favor of responsibility. Therefore, anybody who believes that losing you would allow them to get away with anything is mistaken. You are the moment when grace said, "Enough." And that's when you start to grow, heal, or fall. You are not the penalty. Indeed, they are. You are the live proof that, despite its strength, grace has its limits. 10th, in order to become pure, they had to pass through your borders, which were the fire. Setting limits was never only a self-defense tactic. Rather, it was a surprise test. You weren't trying to punish or drive them away when you answered no. They were forced to face the aspects of themselves they were avoiding by a burning line in the sand. Your limits burned through their cozy deceptions, delusions, and manipulations like fire. That fire broke their egos, exposed their flaws, and showed the unvarnished reality behind their masks. That type of heat is too much for most individuals. They attempt to put out the fire with gaslighting and excuses, retreat, or act as if nothing occurred. However, you didn't give up. You didn't back down. Your limits turned into a mirror that reflected their own dysfunction. And for those used to hiding behind mirrors and smoke, it was terrible. Not everyone was intended for this fire. It is revered. This kind of cleansing procedure either consumes or cleanses. Few people make it through it because most lack the insight or bravery to address themselves honestly when faced with such an uncompromising reality. Because real progress requires that type of painful and terrible honesty, even fewer advance. Devastation is not the goal of the fire. It has to do with change. You transformed from a person into a power to be reckoned with by establishing those limits. You pushed them toward the hard road of genuine transformation and questioned their ego-driven tales. They were encouraged to destroy the untrue and emerge from the experience stronger, more lucid, and more pure. No wasn't simply a word to you. They had to cross a spiritual threshold, a holy fire, in order to either escape or be engulfed by their own delusions. You are the one whose presence demands truth, clarity, and progress at all costs because of that. You are the last invitation, number 11. Lessons become harsh after you. You came as the last opportunity to awaken without breaking, the quiet before the storm. Before the fall, you gave a hand extended, teachings given with care, and truth packaged in love. You weren't simply someone going through their existence. You were the universe's way of telling them, here's one more moment to choose growth before consequences become unavoidable. You were the last call to genuine transformation and the last signpost leading to salvation. However, they disregarded it. They ignored the subliminal cautions you represented. They saw your gentleness as apathy and your tolerance as weakness. And they shut the door on gentle teachings by ignoring you. That door did not smash because someone was angry or spiteful. The universe respects free will, which is why it closed. The hard route is the only one available to someone who rejects the easy one. The teachings are no longer as gentle without you. When kindness is being flung back, the universe can't continue to give it out like candy.